So for this shoot, for the first look, we were doing some natural makeup and I decided to light from the side. I have used my 6x6 scrim, which I have showed you in one of my previous videos, and you can watch it here after if you're interested. I have it slightly tilted on an angle, and I only have one video clip of this, and my dumbass filmed it only in vertical, so there's that, but you'll get an idea from a lighting diagram. Anyways, behind the scrim, this time I used two strobes with two small white umbrellas facing each other, and I also used two V-flats from each side, white facing inwards, to bounce some of the light back in. That gave me a nice large side light, which perfectly wrapped around the model's face. I had a black V-flat on the left side as well, just to make sure I had enough contrast and definition on that side. And as for the brightness of the backdrop, after a few tests, I realized it was looking a tad too dark for me. So I grabbed one more strobe, I threw another white umbrella on it, and I just had it at a very low power just to add a little bit of light onto the backdrop. One downside of this is that you do have to use two strobes, whereas if you were just using a bigger light modifier, you could just have one at a higher power and something that spreads the light a little bit more. But on the other side, if you only have umbrellas but you have two strobes that you can get your hands on, this is technically a pretty affordable way to set that up, especially if a studio, for example, that you're renting already has a scrim. All you need is two strobes, two white umbrellas on the side, and just a few V-flats, which again, most studios should have if you're renting. For the second look, we decided to go with a little bit more color in terms of makeup, and I also switched my backdrop from like white grayish to a yellow one. So I decided to test the same setup, but instead of coming from the right side, I moved it directly in front of the model and behind my camera. I immediately felt like that fit the whole vibe of the shoot and the model and the makeup pretty well, and everything else on set really stayed exactly the same as before. Now for the second shoot, I also wanted to use my scrim, but I wanted a bit of a different look. I wanted it almost to feel like just natural light, but what it is that in most studios, if I was shooting that with just natural light, I would have had to shoot at like f1.8 or 1.2 or something like that to get enough light in. And most of the time that's not my look. I want to shoot at f8, at f11 sometimes, you know? So that's the reason why I use strobes, to kind of replicate a little bit of that natural light, but make sure that I can shoot at the apertures that I need to shoot at. So what I did for this shoot, I actually just had the scrim set up on the left side of the camera. I had it pretty high and tilted at like a similar angle as before. And what I did with my strobes, I used the same two strobes that I did before with the same white umbrellas, but the only difference this time with the setup was the fact that I had them tilted towards the ceiling. I was shooting in the studio with white ceilings, which is sort of necessary for this type of setup. And so what happened is that a light would bounce off of the ceilings and go through the scrim and then fall onto the model. So what it is that it creates this nice diffusion because the light first hits the ceiling and only then bounces through the scrim and only then reaches the model. So obviously it creates this nice, very diffused and natural looking light. I personally really like this look. This is really useful for, let's say, even models that don't have maybe perfect skin. If you're shooting someone mature, if you're shooting a brand that has that type of look, you know, within their branding and they're looking for something very soft,